I poured every cent of my divorce settlement into rebuilding my childhood home, only to be kicked out of it. I designed every tile, every wall, but when the homestay launched, my name was gone. No thank you, no credit, not even on my mother's birthday card. I thought Scarlett was a friend, but she didn't just take my brother. She took everything I built and stamped her name on it. I didn't break. I rebuilt. From scratch. Alone. If you think this is just another family story, you're wrong. Hit subscribe to catch the next episodes. We tell the stories no one dares to tell. I poured my heart, money, and memories into that house, and then they cast me out like I had never existed. The cursor blinked once, then again. Evelyn stared at the soft glow of her laptop screen as if daring it to respond, but it wouldn't. Not this time. The homepage of Heart's Haven filled the frame, polished and warm curated tones of cream and rust, soft lighting testimonials glowing with 5-star praise. And there it was, dead center in the footer, the logo, the mark she'd hand-drawn on a napkin during a sleepless night in Milan 7 years ago. A stylized key with a heartbeat wrapped through its handle, her signature embedded in the design, her identity. Without hesitation, she hovered the mouse. One click. The cursor slid to the trash icon. Another, then the final tap. Delete. Gone. Not archived, not moved to drafts, gone. She leaned back in the silence of her loft eyes, tracing the corners of her ceiling, as if trying to make sense of the weight in her chest. But it wasn't confusion. It was clarity, the brutal kind. The kind that arrived after you stopped bargaining with hope. I'm Evelyn Hart. Her voice broke the quiet, steady and sharp like the edge of glass. I'm 36, and I thought I understood betrayal, until the people I built my world around taught me its real shape. Outside, the Chicago skyline pulsed with its usual indifference, a web of neon and steel-lit windows and strangers. But in here, in this quiet room with too much memory, Evelyn reached for the drawer in her desk and pulled out the red leather ledger she hadn't touched in months. She opened it. There it was, the original draft of Heart's Haven, a sketch of her childhood home redrawn with vision and dignity. Wide porches, flower boxes, heritage lighting. Not a luxury palace, not a sterile Airbnb. A home that breathed. A place reborn just like she thought they all would be. The memory came uninvited, vivid and warm. Her parents sat in the sunlit dining room of the old house, the table still wobbly from decades of half-fixes. Her mother in that cardigan with the one missing button, her father nursing tea from the chipped mug Evelyn had painted for him when she was 9. And there in front of them, she placed the thick envelope. "What's this?" her mother had asked, eyes narrowing with both fear and awe. Everything Evelyn had said. It's the divorce settlement. My share. And I'm putting it here into this house. Into you. The room had gone still. $280,000 wasn't just money. It was time she couldn't get back. It was the sleepless nights when her ex had gone off-grid. It was every compromise she'd swallowed, every dream delayed, every bruise concealed beneath concealer and silence. And she gave it away without asking for ownership, without a contract. Her father's hands had trembled when he reached for the envelope. We couldn't accept this, Eve. You already have, she had replied, smiling through tears. We're not losing this house. We're rebuilding it. That was the beginning. The kitchen was the first room to change. Out went the yellowing cabinets and decades-old appliances. In came polished walnut and brass finishes tile patterned with ancestral nods to their Irish and Polish roots. Evelyn brought in craftsmen she trusted. She designed every inch herself, sleepless, meticulous, inspired. She added soundproof insulation to the gable bedroom because she remembered the squeak that used to keep her up as a child. She picked curtains that matched the lavender her mother had once planted along the porch. She recreated the curve of the wooden banister exactly as it had been before it rotted, because that curve, that smooth bend, had once caught her hand when she almost fell at 6 years old. This wasn't just renovation, it was reclamation. And it wasn't hers. Not legally, not on paper, but in every breath of the building she had embedded herself. There was one night she couldn't forget Leo sitting on the steps of the front porch, beer in hand, shirt untucked, that easy grin he wore when he wasn't trying to impress anyone. "You did good, sis," he'd said. "This place, it's magic." Evelyn had laughed. "It always was. We just forgot how to see it." He'd nudged her shoulder. "You always see what the rest of us miss." That night, they'd sat there for hours talking about their parents, their childhood, the neighbors who'd moved away, the ones who'd died, and the ones they wished had. It felt like the old days back when it was just the two of them against the world. No pretense, no roles, just siblings, survivors. Evelyn had gone to bed that night thinking maybe this was her place after all. Maybe she didn't need a title to belong. But belonging is dangerous when it's based on assumption. The present tugged her back like a rubber band snapping against skin. She closed the ledger gently, then stood and walked to the bookshelf. On the top shelf, buried behind awards and architecture books, she reached for the small box labeled Personal. Inside a bundle of cards, birthday letters, and hand-drawn crayon notes from Leo back when he couldn't spell Evelyn right. She rifled through them until she found it the last birthday card she had bought her mother. It was never opened, still in its crisp envelope, still sealed. The return address she'd scribbled in haste after a long design consultation overseas was still smudged at the corner. On the back, in faint cursive, it read, "To Mom. 61 candles and not a day dimmer." She stared at the unbroken seal. The date was 9 months ago. Evelyn sat down slowly, the unopened envelope balanced in her hands like an accusation. No one had mentioned the dinner. No one had responded to her RSVP. And no one had told her it had already happened 3 days before she flew home from a project in Madrid, arms full of gifts and ideas for expanding the Haven's upstairs suite into a wellness loft. When she walked into the house that day, the candles had already been blown out. The cake had been eaten. And her mother had smiled awkwardly from the kitchen, wiping down already clean counters. "I thought you'd forgotten," her mother had said too quietly. Evelyn hadn't forgotten. She'd sent the card, she'd booked the flight, she had gifts in the car. She'd timed the jet lag to arrive cheerful, not groggy. She'd tried. She always tried. And somehow she was still the one left out. The card now sat like a fossil in her palm, a memory of effort, unacknowledged affection intercepted. She tucked it back into the box and closed it with finality. The truth wasn't sudden. It had arrived in fragments. A dinner she wasn't invited to. A meeting she wasn't told about. A logo design altered without her approval. A guest book online where Scarlett's name appeared under creative director. Scarlett. The name tasted like rust. But that part of the story hadn't arrived yet, and Evelyn wasn't ready to say it aloud. Not here, not yet. She returned to her laptop, opened a blank document, and titled it simply, Receipts. Not the kind you keep for tax purposes. The kind that mark moments. Who said what? Who stayed silent? Who let someone else erase you while you were still standing in the room? The kind that don't get submitted, they get remembered. She began to type. First line, logo deleted at 9:03 p.m. June 4th. No one asked, no one noticed. Next, last family email received May 2nd. About plumbing, no mention of Scarlett's new title. Another, birthday card to Mom. Never opened. Still sealed. Found June 1st in linen drawer behind expired coupons. Evelyn stopped typing. She stared at the blinking cursor. The receipts would keep coming, because the betrayal hadn't stopped yet. It was still unfolding, quiet, efficient, polite. But tonight she had drawn a line, and there would be no stepping back across it. Outside the city thrummed on. Inside, Evelyn opened a second document, Title Heart's Revival. She stared at the empty page for a long moment, then she smiled, and she began. It started with a casual text from Leo. "Hey, you mind if I bring someone to dinner Sunday night?" Evelyn had responded without thinking. Of course not. Always room for more. At the time, she assumed it was another of his flings, maybe someone from the new co-working space he'd rented near the Riverwalk. Leo wasn't known for consistency. His relationships, like his career choices, had a pattern: impulsive beginnings, mediocre middles, and quiet endings no one really talked about. He'd always leaned on charm to clean up the mess. Sunday evening arrived with the golden haze of late spring. Evelyn brought a lemon tart from that little French place on Damon's, still warm. Her mom was already setting the table. Her dad was humming an old tune in the kitchen. It was normal, familiar. Then the door opened, and she walked in. Scarlett! It was like watching a ghost step out of a high school yearbook, but updated, sleeker, more composed. The same honey blonde hair, though now perfectly curled. The same pale green eyes. The same laugh, though now it came with a practiced grace, like she knew when to use it. She was holding Leo's hand. Tata Leo grinned. "Everyone, this is Scarlett." Scarlett smiled, stepped forward, and wrapped Evelyn in a warm, practiced hug that smelled faintly of lavender and ambition. "Evie," she said, "it's been too long." Evelyn blinked once carefully. "You two know each other?" Scarlett's laugh bubbled out. "Are you kidding? Leo and I ran into each other at Maya's gallery opening last month. It was cosmic. I mean, what are the odds I'd just moved back to Chicago 2 weeks earlier?" Leo beamed. "Turns out she's been living in Portland doing hospitality consulting or some fancy thing like that." Evelyn forced a smile. What a small world. Her mother, always one to take things at face value, was already fawning. "Scarlett, you look radiant. And what a lovely surprise. Sit, your family now." And just like that, she was seated at the table. The conversation flowed, or rather Scarlett guided it. She brought up high school memories Evelyn hadn't thought about in years. She talked about their infamous prom prank, their junior year sleepovers, the homemade pizza crust that always turned out too salty. She even mimicked Evelyn's laugh from back then, and everyone chuckled, including Evelyn, though it felt like swallowing glass. She praised Evelyn's work on the homestay with open enthusiasm. "Honestly, the space is incredible. The lighting, the layout, the scent profile. I can tell this was done by someone who gets hospitality. Truly." Evelyn thanked her, guarded but polite. Then Scarlett added, "Though, have you considered offering curated weekend packages? You know, like themed experiences, maybe wine and writing retreats or mindful Mondays? I ran something similar in Portland. The conversion rates were insane." Her mother clapped lightly. "Oh, that's a lovely idea." Scarlett waved her hand modestly. "I mean, just something to think about. But really, Evie, it's beautiful work." Evie. No one had called her that in 15 years. The night ended with toasts, laughter, and a sudden selfie session on the porch, Scarlett in the center, flanked by Evelyn's parents and Leo. Evelyn stood at the edge holding a dish towel. No one asked her to join. That should have been the first sign, but it wasn't. The second came 2 weeks later, when Scarlett showed up to the weekly operations meeting at Heart's Haven. Evelyn walked into the sunlit back room, their makeshift HQ holding spreadsheets and marketing reports, only to find Scarlett already seated with a latte and a notepad, chatting animatedly with Leo and their mother. "Oh, good, you're here," Scarlett beamed. "We were just talking about potential event programming." Evelyn glanced at Leo. He didn't meet her eyes. She sat down slowly. "I wasn't aware we had new attendees." Scarlett laughed. "Guilty, I just couldn't resist. I mean, Leo's been telling me so much about the business. You guys have built something really special. I'd love to contribute if I can." Evelyn said nothing. She opened her laptop and pulled up the agenda. But Scarlett kept talking. "I've sketched out a few ideas, just ballpark stuff. Like maybe integrating wellness elements into the guest experience. Think guided morning meditations, herbal tea pairings, scent design. Nothing disruptive, just elevating what you already have. Their mother nodded. You know that could really help set us apart. Evelyn looked down at her own notes, 3 pages of revised guest flow optimizations she'd spent all weekend compiling. Scarlett's ideas were fine. Some were even interesting. But they weren't part of the plan. And no one had asked. Over the next few weeks, Scarlett began to appear more frequently. Sometimes with Leo, sometimes alone. She'd drop by the Haven just to say hi or to brainstorm. One afternoon, Evelyn caught her giving a tour to a group of out-of-town friends, explaining the design choices, speaking as if she'd been part of every decision. This corner suite Evelyn wanted to knock out the wall, but I convinced her to preserve the arch. It's got such great bones, right? That never happened. It wasn't just the rewriting of facts. It was how naturally Scarlett stepped into a role Evelyn hadn't offered. By the 6th week, Evelyn noticed her name had been added to the team group chat. No explanation, just included. Meetings started shifting times. Evelyn would show up on Thursday mornings to find out the meeting had been moved to Tuesday and held without her. Must have slipped our minds, Leo would mumble. Sorry, sis. Scarlett was now helping with social media, ordering floral arrangements, recommending a new booking platform. Her suggestions were often framed as casual, but they were adopted almost immediately. When Evelyn asked why they were switching systems again, Leo shrugged. Scarlett says it's more intuitive. Besides, we need to evolve. And you don't think I would have considered that? Evelyn asked. Leo looked away. It's not a competition. Evelyn laughed, but it didn't sound like amusement. Feels like it. Scarlett always managed to stay just within the bounds of plausible deniability. Never overtly hostile. Always kind. Always helpful. Always just offering support. But the effect was unmistakable. Evelyn's influence was waning, diluted, overshadowed, rewritten. It became harder to ignore the pattern. A new aromatherapy line in the bathroom suggested by Scarlett. A blog series on healing homes, ghost-written by Scarlett. A branded candle with a label that read, The Scarlett Signature Scent. When Evelyn asked where the approval chain was for these expenses, Leo looked annoyed. We thought you were okay with it. We, Scarlett and I. She's got experience with this stuff. But I'm the one who built this business. Built, Leo repeated. Past tense. Evelyn left the meeting early that day. Not in anger, in something worse, disbelief. The erosion wasn't loud. It didn't come as a shout or a slam or a dramatic betrayal. It came as a smile and a soft voice saying, You're not needed anymore. She began to keep a list. Another kind of receipt. Tuesday meeting moved without notice. Friday, Scarlett submitted invoice to florist. Account charged under events budget. Sunday guest called Scarlett the owner. No correction made. Each entry tightened the knot in her chest. One night alone in the office, Evelyn pulled up the original renovation files. There was a folder titled Dream Board filled with mood boards, sketches, paint samples, photos of her grandmother's lace curtains she'd used as inspiration for the guest suite linens. Scarlett hadn't been there for any of it, but now she was in every room. Evelyn closed the laptop. Her hands were shaking. This wasn't a takeover. It was an erasure. And it had just begun. It was the curtains that hit her first. They weren't hers. The ones hanging in the Willow Suite were sheer white, stiff, and modern. Nothing like the cream-colored linen she'd chosen with the delicate hand-stitching from a local textile artist in Hyde Park. Evelyn had picked those originals because they caught the morning light like soft milk, scattering it in waves across the oak floors. They belonged to the room, to the story. Now they were gone, replaced without a word. She stood in the doorway, suitcase still in hand, staring at the cheap replacements billowing slightly from the air vent. They didn't even reach the floor. Then her eyes drifted lower. The custom tiles she'd had shipped from Portugal, the ones with the pale blue and gold motif that echoed her grandmother's wedding china, had been ripped out. In their place, matte gray porcelain rectangles, cold, soulless. And the brass plaque on the door that used to read, "The Haven Begins Here." Designed by Evelyn Hart. Gone. In its place, the Willow Suite, curated comfort by HSH Collective. What the hell was HSH Collective? Her heart beat like it wanted to escape her chest. She moved through the hallway like a ghost in a house she didn't recognize anymore. Every space had shifted. Her color palette had been drowned in taupe. Her accent pieces replaced by soulless minimalist decor, dried flowers, blank canvases, hotel art. In the main sitting room, the signature brick wall she had painstakingly preserved, scrubbed by hand, then sealed to keep its raw beauty intact, had been painted over in matte white. White, as if none of it, the history, the grit, the texture, had ever mattered. Evelyn dropped her bag and walked into the dining room. Her mother was arranging teacups, humming to herself, not noticing her daughter's presence until Evelyn spoke. "Did you paint the brick?" Her mother jumped. "Oh, Evelyn, I didn't hear you come in. You painted the brick? Well..." Her mother glanced behind her, then back, setting the final cup down too carefully. Scarlett thought it brightened the space. Guests like clean lines these days. "It wasn't about lines," Evelyn said flatly. "That wall was the original spine of this house. It held nail marks from Grandpa's coat hooks. You can't just..." "It's still the same wall, sweetheart," her mother said too quickly. "Just with a new finish." Evelyn's voice tightened. "What about the curtains, the tiles, the plaque with my name?" Her mother busied herself folding a napkin. "You know, we've had so much going on lately. Scarlett's been helping reorganize. She has such a fresh eye. No one told me you were changing things. We assumed you'd be busy with work. Leo said you had that gallery project downtown. I didn't ask Scarlett to redesign my work." "She's not redesigning, just updating, evolving." Evelyn stared at her. The room swam. She felt it again, that quiet panic, the kind that doesn't scream but strangles. The sense that the ground you're standing on has been subtly, methodically shifted inch by inch, until one day you're not on solid ground at all. And no one told you. That night, she didn't sleep. She paced the loft above the old library room she once used to sketch in. Even that had changed, now filled with pastel yoga mats and a mindfulness corner with motivational quotes in calligraphy fonts plastered to the wall. "Let go or be dragged." She almost laughed. By morning, a new headline had arrived. Literally. A newsletter sat in her inbox, Heart's Haven, reimagined. It was a PDF promotional blast clearly prepped by someone with graphic design training not hers. There on the front page was a composite image of the Haven with stock photo models smiling on a porch she had built, standing in front of windows she had installed beneath signage she had approved. Except it wasn't her name anywhere. Under Creative Team it read, "Concept and Guest Experience. Scarlett Lowe. Operations and Events. Leo Hart. Legacy Support. Robert and Helen Hart." No mention of Evelyn. But they'd used her old architectural renderings, traced, repurposed, color-adjusted, now labeled as Foundational Drafts by HSH Creative. Not even her initials. She scrolled through the newsletter like a woman watching her own ghost being redressed in someone else's clothes. Testimonials she'd collected, copy she had written, slogans she had coined. Gone, rebranded, rewritten. Scarlett hadn't just walked in. She'd rewritten the narrative. Evelyn walked downstairs, still gripping her phone. She found Leo in the kitchen, pouring himself coffee like nothing had happened. "You sent this out." He glanced at her nonchalant. "The newsletter." "Yeah. Pretty slick, right? Scarlett's got this whole background in experience marketing. She's a genius at guest psychology." "You erased me." Leo set the mug down. "What are you talking about?" "My renderings, my designs, my contributions. They're not just buried, they're gone. You credited her. You used my blueprints, and you left my name out." Leo gave a tired sigh. Not everything's a conspiracy. The brand's evolving. Scarlett brought in outside investors. She's streamlining the messaging. You've been kind of detached lately, busy with your other projects. I'm detached because no one tells me anything anymore. That's not fair, no, Evelyn said. What's not fair is watching my name be scrubbed from the place I saved. You're blowing this out of proportion. I invested everything I had, not just money, time, identity, and now I'm a footnote. If that. Leo leaned against the counter, arms crossed. You're being intense. Maybe take a breath. Evelyn's voice dropped to a whisper. Don't patronize me. He looked away, and that was worse than any scream. She left, didn't slam the door, didn't make a scene, just walked out into the sunlight that suddenly felt sterile. 3 days later, the betrayal metastasized. She hadn't been invited to the quarterly family meeting, the one they used to hold around the old fireplace with hot cider and color-coded binders. Evelyn had organized the first of those meetings herself, created the format, standardized the action plans. She was the one who taught Leo how to read a quarterly report. Now it had happened without her. She only found out because of a photo, posted publicly on Heartshaven's Instagram. A filtered group shot her parents, Leo and Scarlett, all raising glasses of wine under string lights in the back garden, captioned, "Exciting new direction coming soon. The HSH family just keeps growing." Scarlett stood in the center, hand resting on Leo's shoulder, her other hand on Evelyn's mother's arm, possessive, familiar. Evelyn stared at it for a long time. Not because it hurt, because it made her numb, like pressing into a bruise that no longer screamed, just throbbed. That night, she walked the neighborhood. The old streets of Oakbridge still looked the same. The mural by the corner cafe, the cracked sidewalk by the library, where Leo had once tripped on a skateboard and knocked out his front tooth. The stop sign she had written her name on in Sharpie in 8th grade. Evie was here. She'd been everywhere. In this town, in that house, in that business. Now she was nowhere. The next morning, she returned to the Haven not to confront, not to rage, but to see something for herself. When she stepped onto the porch, the automatic scent diffuser released a lavender mist. Scarlett's choice. Inside, a young couple at the front desk was being welcomed by name. Evelyn stood off to the side unnoticed. Scarlett emerged from the hallway wearing a silk blouse, clipboard in hand, smiling wide. "Welcome to your new favorite getaway," she said to them, warmth polished to perfection. "We're so glad to have you." Then she looked over and saw Evelyn. She blinked just once, and then smiled as if everything was perfectly fine. "Evelyn, good morning," Evelyn said. "I wasn't aware we were deleting people now." Scarlett tilted her head, the smile never fading. "I'm not sure what you mean." "You know exactly what I mean." A pause. Then Scarlett walked closer, lowered her voice. "This place is bigger than one person, Evelyn. It's a collective vision now." Evelyn didn't blink. That vision came from me. Scarlett's eyes softened in mock sympathy. "You can still be part of it, in your own way. But you need to adapt. Let others take the lead sometimes." Evelyn studied her. "You don't want me involved. You want me silent." Scarlett smiled like the saint. "I want what's best for the Haven." Evelyn nodded once. Then she turned and walked out, voiceover rising from the quiet. "I never thought the day would come when I'd have to ask permission to enter the home I once saved. But that day came, and it answered a question I hadn't dared speak aloud. Can your own family forget who you are? The answer is yes, if you let them." And she wouldn't. Not anymore. It started with a missing file. Evelyn was sitting at her kitchen counter late one night, sifting through the business drive folder she had built from scratch, organized to perfection. Every invoice, every blueprint, every contract had its place, color-coded, labeled by date and contributor. Except now the most important one wasn't there. HSH Ownership Ledger, version 3.1. Final had vanished. Not renamed, not moved, deleted. She blinked, checked the trash. Nothing. Checked version history. Erased. It wasn't paranoia. Evelyn had saved that document herself the month she finalized the capital distribution agreement with her father. She'd outlined the terms clearly: 30%, Evelyn, 30%, Leo 30%, parents joint 10% reserved. The last portion was her idea of flexible block for future staff incentives or emergency liquidation. It was meant to protect the business from predatory outside investments. Now, according to the replacement file quietly uploaded to the company cloud, 40% had been reassigned to a new stakeholder, an entity named North Garden Trust, listed as an angel partner under Experience and Growth Phase 2. Evelyn's stomach flipped. She opened Illinois's business registration portal and began searching public records. It didn't take long. North Garden Trust was registered 6 weeks ago. Its founding signatory, Sienna Whitley. She stared at the name for a long time. Sienna Whitley. It meant nothing. Not an investor she'd met. Not a name that had come up in any board emails. No LinkedIn, no portfolio site, no digital fingerprint at all except a P.O. box registered in Lincoln Park, and a one-page website that redirected to a landing page for a company called Bloom Venue Collective. She clicked and froze. There on the homepage was an animated rendering of a luxury boutique hotel designed to elevate heritage spaces through scent, softness, and soul. The words were familiar. Too familiar. She scrolled. Below the fold were visuals mock-ups of window arches she had drawn for Heart's Haven color palettes from her files, even the same pattern she had sourced from that antique bookbinder in rural Michigan. Then the credits. Creative vision. Scarlet Low Design, execution Bloom Venue Interiors in partnership with North Garden Trust. There was no mention of Evelyn Hart, but it was her work, her heart, her handwriting in the details. Scarlett hadn't just hijacked a business. She was monetizing Evelyn's identity. Evelyn sat motionless, the silence around her loud in its betrayal. She grabbed her phone, dialed her father's number. It rang twice, then voicemail. She tried her mother, then Leo. Nothing. By noon the next day, she was standing on the porch of Heart's Haven Heart, pounding phone in hand with screenshots, printouts, receipts, the kind that cut deeper than numbers. She walked straight into the kitchen, bypassing guests, ignoring greetings, storming past the new candle display Scarlett had installed. Leo looked up from his tablet. "You busy?" she asked, her voice cool as steel. He smirked. "Depends. Are you here to give us another lecture? I'm here to ask why 40% of our business is now owned by a fake trust, registered under a fake name, tied to a company Scarlett just launched using my designs." Leo's smile dropped. "I don't know what you're talking about." She dropped a stack of papers on the counter with a satisfying slap. "Then read." He glanced at the top page, then another, then froze. His jaw tightened. Scarlett said this was above board. She forged signatures. No, she didn't. She used a trust to hide her name, and then funneled ownership through a shell LLC to build another version of my hotel while erasing me from this one. Leo's voice grew sharp. "You're being paranoid. I'm being informed. You're always so suspicious, so controlling. Maybe if you weren't so busy micromanaging." "Say the word jealousy," Leo Evelyn snapped. "Just say it so we can be done here." He hesitated. "Then you are jealous of her, of me. You've always been like this." Evelyn stared at him. "Jealous," she said, nearly whispering. "Of someone who stole my life while I stood here bleeding out and still tried to save yours." He had no reply. Their mother entered then, holding a clipboard, smile ready, until she saw Evelyn's face. "And the papers." "What's going on?" she asked. Evelyn looked her straight in the eye. "Scarlett's not an investor. She's a thief. She's used a false name to reassign ownership, stolen my blueprints, and launched a copy of Heart's Haven under a different brand built from my designs." Their mother blinked. I didn't know." "You didn't ask," Evelyn said. "Sweetheart, I'm sure there's an explanation." "Stop!" The word cut sharper than she intended. "Every time something doesn't feel right, you tell me to be calm, to be kind, that there's probably an explanation. And every time I listen, I lose another piece of myself in this place." "I thought you were busy with your consulting work," her mother offered weakly. I was, Evelyn said, her voice rising. And I still showed up. I was always here. Even when you didn't see me. Even when you didn't want to. Her mother looked away. Leo folded the papers back up, not meeting her eyes. Scarlett has vision. She sees where this could go. She sees what I built and wants to slap her name on it. Maybe he said bitterly, it's because you're too precious about everything. Maybe it's hard to work with you. Evelyn nodded slowly. Now I know where I stand. She turned and walked through the hallway toward the original guest room she'd designed 3 years ago, the Magnolia Room. Except that name was gone now too. The sign on the door read The Rosewood Suite, featuring Bloom venue accents. Inside, the rug she'd hand-woven with a textile artisan in Santa Fe was gone. The antique desk she'd restored was replaced with a mass-market chrome table. The delicate wall sconce she'd spent weeks sourcing from a defunct lighting company in Vermont had been taken down, wires still raw in the drywall. And sitting on the center table was a book, The Art of Curated Stays, with Scarlett's face on the back cover and an excerpt claiming every detail tells a story. I believe hospitality is personal. I believe beauty is healing. Evelyn felt the air thicken, not with grief, with fury. Scarlett hadn't just copied her. She'd colonized her, rebranded her, erased her. And her family, the people she'd gone bankrupt to help, had watched it happen with their hands folded in their laps and their mouths shut. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She took out her phone and snapped a single picture, her standing in the center of the room she designed in the business she resurrected, now labeled under someone else's name. No caption, no filter. Just her face. Still, sharp, silent. Later that night, Evelyn sat in her loft, the photo open on her desktop. She thought about every moment that led here. The nights she stayed up designing floor plans, the days spent choosing scent profiles and arranging lighting to soften corners, the quiet joy of watching guests smile when they walked in and whispered, "It's beautiful here." All of it had been taken, and still no one had said thank you. No one had stopped Scarlett, because deep down they'd let it happen, because it was easier to let someone else play the part of Evelyn Hart, as long as Evelyn stopped making noise. She looked at the photo again, and finally whispered to herself, "You're done being quiet." And for the first time, she believed it. The email Evelyn sent was only 12 words long. Effective immediately, I am withdrawing all financial support from Heart's Haven. Legal documentation to follow. She didn't sign it with warmth or anger, just her name. No salutation, no apology, no plea for understanding. For the first time in 3 years, she owed them no explanations. She hit send. Then she leaned back, staring out at the cold city beyond her loft windows. The skyline looked the same, but something in her had shifted, subtle, irreversible. Something inside her had finally stopped begging. By the next morning, her inbox was already crawling with panic. Leo's message was first. "Wait, what are you talking about? What support?" Her father followed, blunt and shaken. "Your mother is crying. We didn't know about the licensing issue. Can we talk?" Then Scarlett, curt and patronizing. "If this is emotional retaliation, it's deeply unprofessional. Please reconsider." Evelyn didn't reply, not to any of them. Instead, she walked into the law office of Meredith Shaw, the one woman she trusted to read through every buried clause and not flinch. Meredith looked up from her desk. "You're sure?" "I'm done," Evelyn said. Meredith nodded once and pulled the folder closer. Termination of partnership. Cease of financial advisory role. Non-renewal of capital accounts. And severance of creative rights with caveats. "I want to retain my original designs," Evelyn said. "They don't get to keep those. I've included that clause. And the trademarked elements registered under your name." Evelyn exhaled. Not relief, just weight shifting. As she signed the final page, Meredith looked at her carefully. "Are you ready for the fallout?" "I'm not trying to burn it down," Evelyn said. "I'm just not going to hold it up anymore." Voiceover soft but sharp. "I didn't want to destroy them. I just didn't want to be used anymore." That night, the locks changed on all her shared financial dashboards. The automated deposits she had quietly kept running for operations support. Digital marketing reservation software stopped. No announcement, no drama. Just silence. The kind that comes when scaffolding falls and the building has to stand on its own. She didn't wait to watch it collapse. She went looking for something else. 3 blocks down from Heart's Haven, tucked between a thrift bookstore and a boarded-up bakery, sat a structure she hadn't noticed in years. A gutted-out former warehouse with cracked windows, graffiti scars, and a heavy steel door that refused to close straight. She remembered it vaguely from childhood. An old mechanic's shop. Rumors of a speakeasy in the basement. A space where people went when they didn't fit somewhere else. She walked through the dust and silence-broken floor tiles crunching beneath her boots. And for the first time in weeks, she breathed, not in resignation, in possibility. The next morning, she signed a 1-year lease. The landlord, a woman in her 70s named Marcella, handed her the keys without small talk. "You're gonna turn it into something beautiful," Marcella said. "I can see it." Evelyn nodded. "That's the plan." She didn't tell anyone. No social media posts, no cryptic announcements. This wasn't revenge. This was resurrection. Alone, Evelyn stripped the walls herself, tore up the water-warped carpet, sanded the concrete floors until her hands blistered. She played Nina Simone at full volume and let her sweat drip into the sawdust. At night, she sketched on the walls in chalk outlines of doors, light paths, suspended beams. It wouldn't be another homestay. It would be something different. Heart's Revival, a space not for luxury, for reclamation, for the ones who'd been cast out by the people who should have known better. She knew what she was building before she even named it. A gallery, a healing space, a home for art made from grief, from exile, from survival. The first exhibit was already forming in her mind. The Invisible Hands. Each piece would feature a different artist, all of whom had been cut from family left behind, erased from legacies they helped build, the silent laborers of someone else's success. She reached out to her old friend Marco, a photographer who'd spent 2 years photographing caregivers whose names were never in obituaries. Then to Hani, a textile artist who wove portraits into fabric using threads pulled from clothes donated by mothers who'd gone no contact with their children. They all said yes, no questions, because they knew that kind of silence too. While Evelyn worked, the messages from her family stopped, except for one a week later, her mother. "We're lost without you. Please don't give up on us." She didn't reply. Not because she didn't feel the ache, but because the ache no longer dictated her actions. She poured herself into Heart's Revival. Nights were spent sealing paint. Mornings were for black coffee and contractor meetings. By week 5, the electrical wiring was safe. By week 7, the floors gleamed again. The windows let light through. It still smelled like dust and effort, and it was hers. Opening night came with no red carpet, no catering, no influencers. Just 37 people, some strangers, some survivors, all standing in a room filled with quiet testimony. The first image in the exhibit was a photo Evelyn took of herself. Not her face, just her hands, covered in plaster, grime, ink, dust. Titled Builder, erased. Each piece that followed had a plaque beneath it, not with the artist's name, but with one line, for the ones who were left out of the credits. By the end of the night, there were tears, laughter, silence, and for Evelyn, peace. A reporter from a small local art magazine asked if Heart's Revival was meant as a message. She smiled. "It's not a message," she said. "It's a mirror." At 2:12 a.m., long after the last guest had gone, Evelyn stood alone in the center of the room. No applause, no family, no forced smiles. Just her, surrounded by the voices of people who'd once believed they were disposable. She closed her eyes and whispered, "I see you." Not to the art. To herself. To the version of her who had begged for a seat at a table she built with her own hands. That woman no longer existed, because now Evelyn Hart had her own table, And this time she chose who sat at it. It came in a text message. A name Evelyn hadn't seen in days flashed across her phone. Clara, head of housekeeping at Heart's Haven for over 2 years. I just got let go. No notice. Scarlett said we're streamlining. Can you help? Evelyn stared at the screen, heart clenching. Clara wasn't just staff. She was family adjacent. A woman who'd taken the late shifts without complaint, who once baked lemon bread for guests because she overheard one of them whispering about homesickness. She was the soul of the place. And now she was gone. More messages followed. From Jackson, the night receptionist. My hours got cut. They're switching to remote check-in. Said it's more modern. From Daria, Evelyn's former assistant, Scarlett shut down the client feedback channel. Said it wasn't aligned with the new brand. Then the kicker. A blurry photo from one of the junior housekeepers, a shot of the Heart's Haven exterior. Except the sign had been replaced. No more handcrafted wood, no serif lettering, no family crest in the corner. Just clean sans serif font backlit in sterile white. HSH. Scarlett Low Hospitality. Evelyn didn't blink. She didn't text back. She just closed her eyes and inhaled slow, controlled, practiced. It wasn't hers anymore. She had cut the cord, let the place fall or fly on its own. And yet, her phone rang at 2:11 a.m. She was half asleep, half dressed, the city humming outside her loft. The name on the screen made her freeze. Leo. She let it ring once, twice. She answered on the third. Evie. His voice was slurred, breath shallow. Evelyn sat up straight. Leo. She's gone. What? Scarlett, he sobbed. She took everything. The accounts, the event money. She changed the passwords. Jesus, I don't know what happened. Evelyn stayed silent. She said she needed to meet a vendor and never came back. The bank called me today, said our business account was flagged. But my name, it's not on it anymore. His voice cracked. Evie, I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know she was setting it up like that. She pressed the phone harder to her ear, eyes closed. I thought she loved me, he whispered. Evelyn opened her mouth, then closed it again. Do you hear me? He begged. I messed up. But I didn't know. I thought she was helping. I thought she saw me. There it was, the root of it all. Leo still trying to be seen. She saw what she could use, Evelyn said quietly. And when she was done, she left. He cried harder. She waited for him to say her name, to ask for help, to say he was sorry. He didn't. He only said, what do I do now? And for once she didn't answer. She let the silence say what she couldn't bring herself to, that not every fall deserved a rescue. She hung up and cried alone because it still hurt even when you saw it coming. The next hit was worse. 3 days later, she received a certified envelope from Illinois Department of Revenue subject audit notification. Heart's Haven Hospitality, LLC. Her name was bolded at the top, former co-founder, investor of record. She flipped through the documents, every page heavier than the last. Incomplete filings, transfer of assets without disclosure, ownership transfers unrecorded, suspicion of underreported income. And Evelyn's name still tied to the EIN, still listed as silent partner, still embedded in the digital DNA of a business that had erased her in every other way, except legally. She barely remembered putting the pen to those documents. The early days, the trust, the lack of formality, the way her father had said, we don't need lawyers between family. Now family was the one sending her into court. The courtroom smelled like old carpet and worn paper. Evelyn sat at the plaintiff's table, fingers clasped, listening to the state agent outline the findings. Scarlett was gone, her address disconnected, her LLC dissolved. All responsibility now fell on the listed parties. Leo sat beside her, hollow-eyed and silent. Her parents 2 rows back, her mother clutching a tissue she hadn't used yet. Evelyn's attorney, Meredith Shaw, stood tall. My client had legally withdrawn all involvement months prior. We have digital trails, emails, certified filings. She cannot be held liable for fraudulent activity committed post-severance. The judge nodded slowly. We'll review all documents. Ms. Hart, Can you confirm the date you ceased all funding? Yes, Evelyn said. The day I realized I was no longer welcome in the business or the family. A murmur in the room. Leo didn't look at her. Outside on the courthouse steps, Evelyn paused in the sun. A reporter tried to speak to her, but she waved him off. This wasn't a headline. It was cleanup. And once again, she was the one cleaning the mess. She sat in her car, head against the steering wheel, breathing in the burnt leather and exhaustion. This was what letting go actually looked like. Not a dramatic exit, not a clean escape, but sitting in a parking lot holding the weight of other people's cowardice in your lap and still refusing to let it crush you. That night, she walked through Heart's revival alone. Every wall, every light, every exposed pipe held her fingerprint. No one could steal this. No one could rebrand it. It was made from grief and survival, not illusion. She walked to the back to the corner installation titled Inheritance a Lie in Velvet Gloves, a sculpture of hollow hands reaching out from a cracked family table. She touched the edge of the nearest palm and whispered, "This time you don't catch them. You let them fall." She didn't go to the next court hearing. She sent Meredith. She didn't read Leo's texts either. The last one had said, "You were right about everything." But truth without accountability was just noise. And Evelyn had learned to love her own silence. The law office smelled like lavender and paper. Evelyn sat across from her parents in a glass-walled conference room. Sunlight pouring in through blinds that had been turned just enough to make no one entirely comfortable. Her mother clutched a handkerchief she hadn't yet used. Her father sat with his arms crossed, staring down at the table like it might shift the outcome if he focused hard enough. Leo hadn't arrived. Meredith, Evelyn's attorney, sat beside her, a thick folder resting calmly between her hands. The silence wasn't new, but the weight of it had changed. Evelyn broke it first. "I want to show you something." She reached into her bag, pulled out a manila folder, and slid it gently to the center of the table. Her mother hesitated, then opened it. Inside, printed screenshots, legal filings, and watermarked PDF proofs. They were sharp, indisputable. Each one bore Scarlett's name as applicant, as registrant, as lead designer. And all of them were tied to concepts Evelyn had built by hand. The tile patterns, the scent pairings, the guest flow diagrams, even the curated playlists once played at Heart's Haven, all repackaged under a different brand licensed to a luxury resort in Aspen for a 6-figure contract Scarlett had signed 3 months ago. The evidence was overwhelming. A deep inhale. Then Evelyn's voice, calm but tight. "She didn't just copy me. She didn't just push me out of my own work. She sold it, used a false trust to rebrand what I created. And you let her." Her father blinked, throat twitching like he was about to speak. But he didn't. Her mother flipped through the last few pages, her hands trembling. One document in particular, an interior branding proposal, made her flinch. It used a quote Evelyn had scribbled in a notebook once long ago when designing the Haven's central guest suite. "Comfort begins where expectation ends." Scarlett had attributed it to herself. Her mother finally spoke quietly. "How did you get these?" Meredith answered. "Public filings, IP disclosures, legal databases, everything Scarlett claimed to build, we trace the origins. It all begins with Evelyn." The room went still. Her mother looked up at her, and for the first time in this whole brutal unraveling, her voice cracked. Con đã đúng." Evelyn didn't move. "We should have seen it." Her mother continued blinking hard, but she was confident, helpful. "And you?" "We're angry," Evelyn finished. Her mother nodded slowly, and loud. And we thought maybe you were just used to being in control." "That doesn't excuse what happened," Evelyn said. "You stopped trusting me, and you chose someone who knew exactly how to look like the solution, even as she was stealing the foundation right out from under you." Her father's voice finally broke through, low and defensive. "She fooled all of us." "No," Evelyn replied. "She didn't. She tested you, and you failed. That landed harder than she expected. Her father recoiled slightly but didn't argue. Meredith cleared her throat, polite but sharp. The legal risk is manageable. The fraud investigation is primarily tied to Scarlett's shell company. But if any further contracts surface, particularly involving rebranded Haven designs, we'll need full cooperation from your side to confirm Evelyn's non-involvement. Her father nodded stiffly. Evelyn turned to him. You once said we didn't need contracts between family. That trust was enough. His jaw clenched. Well, she continued, trust isn't what failed here. It was judgment. Yours. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Her mother, voice shaking, said, Is there any way we can fix this? Evelyn tilted her head. Fix what? The brand. The finances. Or the way you looked me in the face for a year and let someone else take my name. Tears welled in her mother's eyes now, but Evelyn didn't stop. You didn't just stand by. You clapped for her. You poured her wine. You let her give tours of rooms I bled over. She took a breath. And when I tried to speak up, you told me I was difficult, jealous, controlling. Her father whispered, We didn't know. You didn't want to know. Silence. Then her mother finally quietly, completely deflated. We chose the wrong person to believe in. Evelyn sat back. Let the words settle. They weren't enough, but they were something. Across the table, her father looked smaller, her mother older. And still Leo hadn't shown up. That told her everything. After a moment, she stood gathering her things. Her mother reached for her hand, but Evelyn stepped back, voice steady. I don't hate you. Her mother looked up startled. But I can't rebuild this with you. Not right now. Maybe not ever. A beat. Because I do forgive you, but that doesn't mean I trust you. Her father's voice was nearly a whisper. Evelyn. She looked him in the eyes. No rage, no fire, just clarity. Forgiveness doesn't mean I'm coming back. She nodded to Meredith, then turned and walked out. She didn't slam the door. She didn't look back. Outside, the wind was sharp but clean. As she stepped into the sunlight, the city moved around her, disinterested, alive, free. And for the first time in months, she walked without weight. Voiceover calm and final. Forgiveness is not an invitation. It's not a welcome mat or a key turned in the lock. It's the last thing I give before walking away, knowing I've done what they never could. And I don't owe them my return just because I healed. And she kept walking. The first headline dropped like a match on dry timber. Aspen Resort faces lawsuit over stolen design blueprints. Evelyn stared at the screen, the article open on her phone. Her tea had gone cold. The cup trembled slightly in her hand, not from fear, but from something more brittle. Satisfaction, restraint, a quiet ache that no victory could soothe. The lawsuit wasn't hers. It came from a third-party architect in Denver who noticed that a recently approved resort concept matched a rejected pitch he'd submitted 3 years prior, only to discover it had been miraculously resurrected under the name Scarlett Hale. His attorney had tracked the paper trail. Scarlett hadn't just plagiarized Evelyn. She'd stitched together stolen bits from multiple sources enough to trigger a formal cease and desist order and a multi-million-dollar copyright suit. The firm representing the architect didn't waste time. They held a press conference within 48 hours backed by screenshots, metadata, and Scarlett's public statements in past interviews. They called it intellectual property laundering. Scarlett had disappeared. Evelyn didn't click the other articles, but she saw the flood growing. Social media threads, angry clients, archived videos from Heart's Haven, where Scarlett had hosted influencer tours under Evelyn's designs. A particular clip Scarlett in the guest suite, explaining the emotional intention behind a lighting choice Evelyn had bled herself dry to perfect, was getting hundreds of thousands of views and equally acidic comments. You can't steal warmth. You can't fake the fingerprints of someone who cared. She looks polished. But Evelyn Hart made that place breathe. And then came the second fire. City suspends Heart's Haven license for 60 days pending investigation. That one Evelyn read twice. The notice was clear due to inconsistencies in property transfer records, misfiled tax documents during the Scarlet Leo expansion, and unregistered renovation permits tied to intellectual property disputes. The property's license was frozen. Guests were refunded. Reservations evaporated. And in a single week, the haven the house Evelyn had poured her divorce into sat empty. It was all falling apart without her lifting a single finger. Her phone rang that night. Not Leo, not her parents. A journalist. She let it go to voicemail. They called back the next morning, and the next evening, and the day after that. Soon it wasn't just one reporter, it was 5. Then networks, podcasts, documentaries. "We'd love your perspective," they all said. "Tell us your side." But Evelyn refused every offer, because the truth didn't need retelling. It was already out there, tangled in legal filings, clinging to the architecture of Heart's Haven like smoke that never left old wallpaper. And besides, she was busy. Heart's revival had gone from soft launch to phenomenon. In just a month, every event space was booked out. The Forgotten Hands exhibit had attracted both local visitors and national attention. Other artists began requesting to host installations, people who had been exiled from families, pushed out of inheritance, overlooked in collaborations, disowned for being too loud, too soft, too real. The space pulsed with color and grief and creation. And the name Evelyn Hart began showing up in places it had never been welcomed before, not attached to daughter of, not sister to, but simply as artist, curator, survivor. One morning, walking into Hart's revival before opening, she found a bouquet of eucalyptus and lavender on the front steps. No note, just scent, familiar, steadying. She didn't need to guess who sent it. She brought it inside, set it in a copper vase by the door, and said nothing. The headlines kept rolling for another week. Ex-interior designer faces class. Action lawsuit over breach of trust. Scarlet Hale vanishes amid allegations. Family-owned business implodes after betrayal comes to light. Evelyn's name was never in the title, but she knew readers whispered it between the lines. Still, she gave no interviews. She painted. She helped a young artist who had once been kicked out of their home hang a piece called Inheritance in Reverse. It showed a single bowl shattered and rearranged into the shape of a heart. She curated a live poetry night where an older man read verses about his estranged daughter, then wept silently while Evelyn handed him water. She stood in the background of her own creation, not silent, not erased, but deliberate. Voiceover soft over footage of her brushing white dust from an old wooden beam. Sometimes you don't need to destroy what hurt you. You just need to become something so whole, so alive, that the wound has no room left to define you. She passed a newsstand that week. The magazine cover showed the Heart's Haven property, boarded windows, overgrown weeds. Another article title, From Haven to Hollow. She didn't smile, but she didn't flinch either. In the quiet of the gallery, she watched a mother and her teenage son study a piece titled Rooms with No Names. It was a series of sketches based on Evelyn's original homestay blueprints, not the ones that were sold, but the early intimate versions hand-drawn, labeled with emotions instead of functions. Peace room, breathing room, memory space. The mother touched the paper gently. Her son whispered, "This is what home should be like." And Evelyn, standing behind the veil curtain, almost wept. Not from pain, from recognition, from the quiet knowing that she'd reclaimed something that could never again be taken. Not a building, not a brand, but a truth, that what you build with your soul cannot be stolen by those who have none. Later that night, as she locked the front door and turned off the lights, her phone buzzed once. A final text from Leo. "I'm sorry." She stared at it for a long moment. Then, without hate, without fanfare, she deleted it and walked back into the night free. Voiceover, gentle and fierce. "I didn't get revenge. I didn't burn their house down. I just built mine better." And when the storm came, it was theirs that didn't survive. It was a rainy Saturday in Chicago. Not the kind of rain that interrupts plans, but the soft, apologetic kind that makes you want to stay inside and listen to stories. Inside Heart's Revival, rows of folding chairs lined the gallery space, now rearranged to face a modest wooden platform lit with warm amber lights. The room smelled faintly of varnished wood and rosemary. A microphone stood in the center waiting. A sign at the entrance read, "Tonight at 7 p.m. Forgotten but Not Gone, Stories of the Unchosen." Evelyn Hart stood off to the side, clipboard in hand, her expression calm but focused. She had organized this event for months a night, dedicated to those who had been left out of wills, left out of weddings, or just left out, period. And they came, people with trembling hands and trembling hearts, some holding envelopes, others gripping nothing but silence. Survivors of estrangement, abandonment, disinheritance. Artists, teachers, retired nurses, even a boy barely 18 who wrote a poem about being raised by his grandmother because Mom said I ruined her 20s. At 7:04, Evelyn walked to the mic. She didn't introduce herself. She didn't explain the event. She simply said, if you've ever had to grieve someone who's still alive, you're home now. The room didn't applaud. It exhaled. One by one they shared. A woman read a letter to her father who disowned her for coming out. A man showed photos of the kitchen he built for his parents before they sold the house and moved without telling him. A teenager displayed a painting titled Inheritance Zero, in which a tree had its roots ripped out and still kept blooming. And Evelyn sat in the front row holding every word like a fragile heirloom. By 9:00 p.m. the event wound down. People hugged, cried, swapped email addresses. No one wanted to leave. And in the soft hum of the gallery's closing, Evelyn found herself alone again, content, until she noticed the small package resting on the edge of the reception table. It was wrapped in brown craft paper tied with a shoelace. No note, just a name scribbled in uneven ink. Evelyn. She looked around, but the gallery was quiet. Rain tapped the windows gently. She took the package inside, locked the doors, and sat at her office desk with the overhead light turned low. Inside was a notebook, leather-bound, worn at the corners. The kind kids used before smartphones existed. It smelled faintly of glue and graphite and basement floors. She flipped the first page, and her breath caught. Leo's Journal, 2001. Her fingers paused, but the rest of her body didn't move. Slowly, as if touching something sacred, she turned to the next page. I think Evelyn is the reason our house feels safe. She hums when she paints. I want to hum like that someday. She helped me build a fort and didn't laugh when I called it my kingdom. I hope I grow up to be like her. Brave, funny, not afraid of thunder. Evelyn placed a hand to her mouth. Page after page, it was like opening a sealed bottle of childhood that had been floating down some invisible river for 20 years. He'd drawn pictures, too. One of them was of the Gak Mai, the old attic they both used to sneak into when things got too loud downstairs. Another showed her painting at the dining table, headphones on, unaware that her little brother was watching her with admiration too big for his frame. And then, this. I don't know what Dad meant when he said Evelyn's too intense. I think she just sees everything all at once. She's like a light that doesn't go out, even when people try to blow her out. Evelyn closed the notebook gently. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. She wasn't crying. Not yet. It was something deeper, like a knot that had been pulled too tight for too long was finally loosening one thread at a time. But she didn't pick up the phone. She didn't write back. She didn't send a thank you or a message asking if Leo was okay. Because some bridges, even when forgiven, should never be crossed again. And that boundary, however invisible, was what gave her peace. The next morning, she brought the journal to Heart's Revival. She placed it on a small pedestal in the corner under a sign that read, "Not all memories hurt. Some remind us who we were meant to be." She never mentioned where it came from. But visitors stopped to read it. They smiled. They whispered. And Evelyn, standing by the back wall, finally allowed herself one quiet, painful, liberating truth: that she didn't need them to come back. She had returned to herself. Voiceover over soft music and images of sunlight pouring through the windows of Heart's Revival. Forgiveness isn't about letting them back in. It's about letting yourself out. Out of the waiting, the hoping, the shrinking. I am Evelyn Hart, and this is the home I built when the one I was born into forgot me. The letter came on a Tuesday. It was handwritten. Not emailed, not typed, not slid under a door anonymously. It arrived in an envelope the color of warm cream with Evelyn's name in her father's penmanship, neat, deliberate, as if each letter had been weighed before written. She opened it, standing at the kitchen counter in Heart's Revival. The light filtered through the skylight above, catching the thin shimmer of ink. There were 2 pages, one from her father, one from her mother. No justifications. No phrases like "we were doing what we thought was best" or "it was complicated." Only this: "We hurt you. We saw what was happening and chose silence. We let Scarlett replace you, not because she was better, but because it was easier. We owe you what we never gave before truth. And if nothing else, we hope this letter gives you the peace of knowing we know we were wrong." Evelyn didn't cry. She sat at the window seat holding the letter in both hands and let the words settle like dust in an old house, finally falling in the corners they belonged to. It wasn't absolution. It was recognition. And sometimes that's the beginning of healing. The next day, Evelyn responded with a single sentence via email. "If you truly want to speak, I'll meet you at Heart's Revival, not Heart's Haven." That Friday, just after sunset, they arrived. Her parents looked older. Not in the way years age a person, but in the way guilt does. They wore muted colors, and neither of them spoke as they stepped into the gallery. Evelyn had cleared the space. No exhibits, no music, just 3 chairs, a pot of tea, and the painting "The Home That Forgot Me" hanging quietly on the far wall. No hugs, no formalities, just presence. Her father broke the silence first. "I thought building a legacy would keep us from falling apart," he said, voice rough. "But I see now we built it on your back and didn't look down to see if you were still standing." Her mother clasped her hands tightly. "I didn't know how to say it then. I only know how to say it now. I was ashamed. Not of you, of myself, for choosing convenience over courage." Evelyn listened, fully, without interruption, and then, "I'm not here for apologies," she said. "I'm here because you finally spoke the truth." They nodded. "We'd like you to come back," her father said, hopeful. She shook her head gently. Not with anger, not with resentment, but with clarity. "No, I don't belong to Heart's Haven anymore." Silence. And then Evelyn reached for something beside her. A rolled canvas tied with a crimson ribbon. She placed it on the table, sliding it toward them. "What is this?" her mother asked. "A new plan," Evelyn said. "A homestay. Smaller, more honest. If you want to build something, start there. But don't use my name." Her father slowly unrolled the canvas. It was a blueprint, gorgeous in its restraint. Open floor plan, multi-generational layout, a garden in the center. At the bottom corner, Evelyn had signed not with her full name, but simply E. They looked up. She looked back. And in that moment, no one asked for forgiveness. No one pretended this fixed anything. It didn't. But what it did was clear the fog. Voiceover over the image of the empty gallery space and 3 untouched teacups. Sometimes reconciliation isn't reunion. It's a pause, a breath, a chance to meet not as family, but as people who finally stopped lying. The night had that rare kind of quiet, the kind that doesn't demand silence but earns it. At Heart's Revival, the air was thick with anticipation. People moved between the photographs, the sculptures, the ink-sketched poems lining the hallway like whispered confessions. Every piece shared one thread: survival after betrayal. Above the entrance, on a new banner, "Those Who Still Stand." Inside, the seats filled one by one. Artists, Survivors, strangers who had once been daughters, sons, partners, believers until someone broke that bond and walked away, and they didn't crumble. Evelyn stood backstage alone. Not nervous, not shaking, steady. This wasn't a comeback, it was a declaration. At 72 Sunner, the spotlight found her. Black blouse, hair pulled back. A silver pin in the shape of a broken lock glinted at her collar. She stepped forward into the warmth of her own creation, the stage beneath her built from salvaged wood, reclaimed and reborn. She didn't carry notes. She didn't need them. I used to believe that betrayal was the end of something. A story closed. A door slammed. But what if it's not the end? What if betrayal is a pruning? What if the things cut off are what we never truly needed to begin with? The audience was breathless. Evelyn's voice didn't waver. Some people lose themselves when they're left behind, and some people bloom. I didn't burn down the house that forgot me. I built a new one for the uninvited, the castaways, the ones who were never chosen, and we filled it with stories no one else wanted to hear because they were too true, too messy, too powerful. This place is not a revenge, it's a resurrection. Silence followed. And then applause. Not thunderous, but long, lingering. A kind of applause that held meaning in its quiet persistence. After the event, Evelyn walked outside into the soft night. She carried one thing in her hand, a brass plaque wrapped in cloth. She stopped at the front gate of Heart's Revival, the original wood fence still intact. She knelt, unwrapped the plaque, and with her own hands fastened it to the post. The camera would hold the image for the unchosen ones, and then pull back slowly. Evelyn stood back and looked at it, not with pride, not even with peace, but with completion. The closing voiceover begins over scenes of guests leaving the gallery, of a mother hugging her daughter at the exit, of someone wiping their eyes beside the poem "She left me to find herself." Don't try to force your way through locked doors. Don't beg to belong where you were only tolerated. Don't fight to be seen by people who look past you. Build your own room. Call it sanctuary. Call it Heart's Revival. Or just call it yours. Fade to black. Then a final line in white handwritten script across the screen. Some legacies are born not from inheritance but from survival.